Well, if you're having as much trouble understanding as I am reading, then I guess all you need to know is that the Savage is getting a tour of society. It's a pretty tame title drop in that last part. The previous reader's note about Shakespeare was very interesting. It's not the title drop. The title drop happened in chapter 8. Mr. hasn't attended class so far. The real title drop the real title drop was in chapter 8. Okay? And it was good. It was not tame at all. It was hardcore. Back on to chapter 11. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then with a weary impatience, as you were. Malthusian drill, explained the headmistress. Most of our girls are free martins, of course. I'm a free martin myself. She smiled at Bernard. But we have about 800 unsterilized ones who need constant drilling. In the Beta Minus geography room. John learnt that a Savage reservation is a place which, owing to unfavorable climatic or geological conditions, or poverty of natural resources, has not been worth the expense of civilizing. A click. The room was darkened, and suddenly on the screen above the master's head, on the screen above the master's head, there were the penitentes of a coma, prostrating themselves before Our Lady, and wailing as John had heard them wail, confessing their sins before Jesus on the cross, before the eagle image of Pukong. The young Etonians fairly shouted with laughter. Still wailing, the penitentes rose to their feet, stripped off their upper garments, and with knotted whips began to beat themselves. Blow after blow. Redoubled. The laughter drowned even the amplified record of their groans. But why did they laugh? Asked the Savage in a pained bewilderment. Why? The provost turned towards him in a still broadly grinning face. Why? Because it's extraordinarily funny. In the cinematographic twilight, Bernard risked a gesture, which in the past, even in total darkness, would hardly have emboldened. They laughed. Again. Why do they laugh? Why? Because it's so extraordinarily funny. In the cinematographic twilight, Bernard risked a gesture, which in the past, even total darkness would hardly have emboldened him to make. Strong in his new importance, he put his arm around the headmistress's waist. It yielded. Willow-willy. This is fucked up, dude. Okay, willow-willy. It wielded willow-willy. Huxley, you bastard. He was just about to snatch a kiss or two, and perhaps a gentle pinch, when the shutters clicked open again. Perhaps we'd better go on, said Miss Keat, and moved towards the door. And this, said the provost a moment later, is the hypnopedic control room. Hundreds of synthetic music boxes, one for each dormitory, stood ranged in shelves round 3 sides of the room. Pigeonholed on the 4th were the paper soundtrack rolls, on which the various hypnopedic lessons were printed. "You slip the roll in there," explained Bernard, interrupting Dr. Gaffney. "You press down this switch." "No, not that one," corrected the provost, annoyed. That one, then. You press down this switch, the roll unwinds, the selenium cells transform the light impulses into sound waves, and there you are," Dr. Gaffney concluded. "Do they read Shakespeare?" asked the Savage as they walked, on their way to the biochemical laboratories, past the school library. "Certainly not," said the headmistress, blushing. "Our library," said Dr. Gaffney, "contains only books of reference. If our young people need distraction, they can get it at the Feelies. We don't encourage them to indulge in any solitary amusements." "5 busloads of boys and girls, singing or in a silent embracement, rolled past them over the vitrified highway. "Just returned," explained Dr. Gaffney, while Bernard, whispering, made an appointment with the headmistress for that very evening. "Returning from the Slough crematorium. Death conditioning begins at 18 months. Every tot spends 2 mornings a week in the hospital for the dying. All the best toys are kept there, and they get chocolate cream on death days. They learn to take dying as a matter of course." "Like any other psychological process," put in the headmistress professionally. 8 o'clock at the Savoy. It was all arranged. On their way back to London, they stopped at the Television Corporation's factory in Brentford. "Do you mind waiting here a moment while I go in and telephone?" asked Bernard. The Savage waited and watched. The main day shift was going off duty. Crowds of lower caste workers were queued up in front of the monorail station. 700 or 800 Gamma, Delta, and Epsilon men and women, with not more than a dozen faces and statures between them. To each of them, with his or her ticket, the booking clerk pushed over a little cardboard pillbox. The long caterpillar of men and women slowly moved forward. "What's in those?" remembering the Merchant of Venice. "Those caskets?" the Savage inquired when Bernard had rejoined him. "The day's soma ration," Bernard answered rather indistinctly, for he was masticating a piece of Benito Hoover's chewing gum. "They get it after their work's over. 4.5-gram tablets. 4 half-gram tablets. 6 on Saturdays." He took John's arm affectionately, and they walked towards the helicopter. "Yes, chew your food." He was masticating it. And don't forget to masticate your sexual hormone gum as well. Lenina came singing into the changing room. "You seem very pleased with yourself," said Fanny. "I am pleased," she answered. Zip. "Bernard rang up a half hour ago." Zip, zip. She stepped out of her shorts. "He has an unexpected engagement." Zip. "Asked me if I'd take the Savage to the Feelies this evening. Oh my god, just read the book. Zip, zip. Her shorts came off. "He has an unexpected engagement." Zip. "Asked me if I'd take the Savage to the Feelies this evening. I must fly." She hurried away towards the bathroom. "She's a lucky girl," Fanny said to herself as she watched Lenina go. There was no envy in the comment. Good-natured Fanny was merely stating a fact. Lenina was lucky. Lucky in having shared with Bernard a generous portion of the Savage's immense celebrity. Lucky in reflecting from her insignificant person the moment's supremely fashionable glory. Had not the secretary of the Young Women's Fortean Association asked her to give a lecture about her experiences? Had she not been invited to the annual dinner of the Aphroditeum Club? Had she not already appeared in the Feely Tone News, visibly, audibly, and tactually appeared to countless millions all over the planet? Hardly less flattering had been the attentions paid her by the conspicuous individuals. The resident world controller's second secretary had asked her to dinner and breakfast. She had spent one weekend with the Ford Chief Justice, and another with the arch community songster of Canterbury. The president of the Internal and External Secretions Corporation was perpetually on the phone, and she had been to Deauville with the deputy governor of the Bank of Europe. It's wonderful, of course, and in a way, and yet in a way, she had confessed to Fanny. I feel as though I were getting something on false pretenses. Because, of course, the first thing they all want to know is what it's like to make love to a savage. And I have to say, I don't know. She shook her head. Most of the men don't believe me, of course. But it's true. I wish it weren't, she added sadly and sighed. He is terribly good-looking. Don't you think so? But doesn't he like you? Asked Fanny. Sometimes I think he does, and sometimes I think he doesn't. He always does his best to avoid me. Goes out of the room when I come in. Won't touch me. Won't even look at me. But sometimes if I turn around suddenly, I see him staring. And then, well, you know how men look when they like you. Yes, Fanny knew. I can't make it out, said Lenina. She couldn't make it out. And not only was bewildered, was also rather upset. Because you see, Fanny, I like him. Liked him more and more. Well, now there'd be a real chance, she thought, as she scented herself after her bath. Dab, dab, dab. A real chance. Her high spirits overflowed in song. Hug me till you drug me, honey. Kiss me till I'm in a coma. Hug me, honey, snuggly bunny. Love's as good as Soma. The scent of blah blah blah. The secret organ was playing a delightfully refreshing herbal capriccio, rippling arpeggios of thyme and lavender. I think secret organ is a typo. The scent organ, because that's actually a thing. The scent organ was playing a delightfully refreshing herbal capriccio, rippling arpeggios of thyme and lavender, of rosemary, basil, myrtle, tarragon, a series of daring modulations through the spice keys into ambergris, and a slow return through sandalwood, camphor, cedar, and new-mown hay, with occasional subtle touches of discord, a whiff of kidney pudding, the faintest suspicion of pig's dung. Back to the simple aromatics with which the piece began. The scent organ, indeed. You gotta be careful when you press the pig's dung key. The final blast of time faded away, died away. There was a round of applause. The lights went up. In the synthetic music machine, the soundtrack roll began to unwind. It was a trio for hyperviolin, supercello, and oboe surrogate that now filled the air with its agreeable languor. 30 or 40 bars, and then, against the instrumental background, a much more than human voice began to warble. Now throaty, now from the head, now hollow as a flute, now charged with yearning harmonics. It effortlessly passed from Gaspard's Forster's low record on the very frontiers of musical tone to a trilled bat note high above the highest C, to which, in 1770 at the Ducal Opera of Parma, and to the astonishment of Mozart, Lucrezia Agigari, alone of all the singers in history, once piercingly gave utterance. Sunk in their pneumatic stalls, Lenina and the savage sniffed and listened. It was now the turn also for eyes and skin. The house lights went down. Fiery letters stood out solid and as though self-supported in the darkness. 3 weeks in a helicopter. An all super singing, synthetic talking, colored, stereoscopic feely with synchronized scent organ accompaniment. Take hold of those metal knobs on the arms of your chair, whispered Lenina. Otherwise, you won't get any of the feely effects. The savage did as he was told. Those fiery letters, meanwhile, had disappeared. There were 10 seconds of complete darkness. Then suddenly, dazzlingly, and incomparably more solid-looking than they should have seemed, in actual flesh and blood, far more real than reality, there stood the stereoscopic images. Locked in one another's arms, of a gigantic Negro and a golden-haired young brachycephalic I don't even know what this word is. I'm sorry. A gigantic Negro and a golden-haired young beta plus female. The savage started. That sensation on his lips. He lifted a hand to his mouth. The titillation ceased. He let his hands fall back on the metal knob. It began again. The scent organ, meanwhile, breathed pure musk. Expiringly, a soundtrack superdove cooed. Coo! And vibrating only 32 times a second, a deeper than African bass made answer. Ah. Ooh. Ah. The stereoscopic lips came together again. And once more the facial erogenous zones of the 6,000 spectators in the Alhambra tingled with almost intolerable galvanic pleasure. Ooh. The plot of the film was extremely simple. A few minutes after the first oohs and ahs, a duet having been sung and a little love made on that famous bearskin, every hair of which, the assistant predestinator was right, could be separately and distinctly felt. The Negro had a helicopter accident, fell on his head, thump. What a twinge through the forehead. A chorus of ows and eyes went up from the audience. The concussion knocked all the Negro's conditioning into a cocked hat. He developed for the beta blonde an exclusive and maniacal passion. She protested. He persisted. There were struggles, pursuits, an assault on arrival. Finally, a sensational kidnapping. The beta blonde was ravished away into the sky and kept there, hovering, for 3 weeks in a wildly antisocial tete-a-tete with the black madman. Finally, after a whole series of adventures and much aerial acrobacy, 3 handsome young alphas succeeded in rescuing her. The Negro was packed off to an adult reconditioning center, and the film ended, happily and decorously, with the beta blonde becoming the mistress of all her 3 rescuers. They interrupted themselves for a moment to sing a synthetic quartet with full super orchestral accompaniment and gardenias. Sorry, there was a... Look at the hyphen, all right? Don't tell me you wouldn't have read it the same. Gardenias. They interrupted themselves for a moment to sing a synthetic quartet with full super orchestral accompaniment and the gardenias on the scent organ. Then the bearskin made a final appearance. And amid the blare of saxophones, the last stereoscopic kiss faded away into darkness. The last electric titillation died on the lips like a dying moth that quivers ever more feebly, ever more faintly, and at last is quite still. But for Lenina, the moth did not completely die. Even after the lights had gone up, while they were shuffling slowly along with the crowd towards the lifts, its ghost still fluttered against her lips, still traced fine shuddering roads of anxiety and pleasure along her skin. Her cheeks were flushed. She caught hold of the savage's arm and pressed it, limp, against her side. He looked down at her for a moment, pale, pained, desiring, and ashamed of his desire. He was not worthy. Not. Their eyes for a moment met. What treasures hers promised! A queen's ransom of temperament. Hastily he looked away, disengaged his imprisoned arm. He was obscurely terrified lest she should cease to be something he could feel himself unworthy of. He was obscurely terrified lest she should cease to be something he could feel himself unworthy of. "I don't think you ought to see things like that," he said, making haste to transfer from Lenina herself to the surrounding circumstances the blame for any past or possible future lapse from perfection. "Things like what, John?" "Things like this horrible film." "Horrible?" Lenina was genuinely astonished. "But I thought it was lovely." "It was base," he said indignantly. "It was ignoble." She shook her head. "I don't know what you mean. Why was he so queer? Why did he go out of his way to spoil things?" In the taxi copter, he hardly even looked at her. Bound by strong vows that had never been pronounced, obedient to laws that had long since ceased to run, he sat averted and in silence. Sometimes, as though a finger had plucked at some taut, almost breaking string, his whole body would shudder with a sudden nervous start. The taxicopter landed on the roof of Lenina's apartment house. At last, she thought exultantly, as she stepped out of the cab. At last, even though he had been so queer just now. Standing under a lamp, she peered into her hand mirror. At last. Yes, her nose was a bit shiny. She shook the loose powder from her puff. While he was paying off the taxi, there would just be time. She rubbed at the shininess, thinking, he's terribly good looking. No need for him to be shy like Bernard. And yet, any other man would have done it long ago. Well, now at last. That fragment of a face in the little round mirror suddenly smiled at her. "Good night," said a strangled voice behind her. Lenina wheeled around. Lenina wheeled round. He was standing in the doorway of the cab, his eyes fixed, staring. Had evidently been staring all this time, while she was powdering her nose. Waiting. But what for? or hesitating, trying to make up his mind. And all the same, thinking. She could not imagine what extraordinary thoughts. "Good night, Lenina," he repeated, and made a strange, grimacing attempt to smile. "But John, I thought you were, aren't you?" He shut the door and bent forward to say something to the driver. The cab shot up into the air. Looking down through the window in the floor, the savage could see Lenina's upturned face. Pale in the bluish lights of the lamps. The mouth was open. She was calling. Her foreshortened figure rushed away from him. The diminishing square of the roof seemed to be falling through the darkness. 5 minutes later, he was back in his room. From its hiding place, he took out his mouse-nibbled volume. Turned with religious care its stained and crumpled pages, and began to read Othello. Othello, he remembered, was like the hero of 3 Weeks in a Helicopter. I don't know if I'm saying Othello right. He took with religious care its stained and crumbled pages and began to read Othello. Othello, he remembered, was like the hero of 3 Weeks in a Helicopter. A black man. Drying her eyes, Lenina walked across the roof to the lift. On her way down to the 27th floor, she pulled out her Soma bottle. 1 gram, she decided, would not be enough. Hers had been more than a 1 gram affliction. But if she took 2 grams, she ran the whisk. 1 gram, she decided, would not be enough. Hers had been more than a 1 gram affliction. But if she took 2 grams, she ran the risk of not waking up in time tomorrow morning. She compromised, and into her cupped left palm shook out 3 half-gram tablets. You're better at this than you give yourself credit for. I'll keep saying it. Dude, please keep saying it. Thank you. That was chapter 11. This prose is a tad overwrought, and I'm not talking like this because I'm threatened by it in any way. I just must say it is a tad overwrought. Okay, sir. Thank you. I enjoyed it as well, even though I butchered it. But I did my best.